Right now, in real time, Jerusalem's oldest cemetery is expanding. Rows of glimmering white tombs crawl down the slopes of the Mount of Olives, pushing ever closer to an ancient gate sealed in stone. The air here feels heavy, almost electric, as if history itself is holding its breath. City planners call it progress. Believers call it prophecy in motion. For over 3,000 years, this mountain has faced Jerusalem's eastern gate, also known as the Golden Gate. Once open, now bricked shut for centuries, that gate stares back at the Mount of Olives like two eyes locked across time. And now, grave by grave, the gap between them is shrinking. Before we continue this discovery, subscribe for more discoveries where faith meets archaeology, and don't forget to turn on notifications for our next revelation from the Holy Land.
To the untrained eye, it's only a logistical choice. More space for burial, more rows for generations yet to come. But to anyone who knows the scriptures, it raises a startling question. What if this slow advance of stone toward the sealed gate isn't random? What if the earth itself is aligning with words written long ago, words that spoke of a Messiah who would return by this very path? The Mount of Olives isn't just landscape, it's a living prophecy, layered with grief, faith, and promise. As the sun pours gold over its pale terraces, it feels like time is moving towards something final, something glorious. Could these new graves be a sign that the story of redemption is nearing its next chapter? We'll journey across the mountain, through scripture and stone, to uncover what may be the most visible proof yet that prophecy is unfolding before our eyes.
The Mount of Olives rises quietly just east of Jerusalem, yet every step on its dusty paths hums with holy memory. This is more than limestone and olive trees. It's a timeline built into the earth itself. Here, King David once walked in sorrow, fleeing from his son Absalom's rebellion. Centuries later, the prophet Ezekiel saw the glory of God lift from the temple and rest upon this very summit before departing from the city. Long before modern bulldozers carved burial terraces, prophets carved meaning into this soil. The location is no accident. The mountain stands on the east, gazing directly across the Kidron Valley toward the Temple Mount. Every sunrise touches it first, as if heaven itself greets these slopes before shining on the rest of Jerusalem. It's as though the land was positioned, geographically and spiritually, to witness whatever God would next unveil. Generations have looked to this mountain as the threshold between the eternal and the earthly. Worshippers climbed it with prayers. Prophets descended it carrying visions. Stones keep secrets here. They've watched empires rise and crumble. Pilgrims weep and rejoice. And now the old mountain is stirring again. The ground that once hosted prophets, priests, and kings is welcoming countless tombs, each one facing east, waiting, watching. If these slopes could speak, what stories would they tell? Perhaps they'd whisper that history doesn't end in the past, it circles forward. Perhaps they'd remind us that every prophecy once spoken into this wind has never truly died. But this sacred hillside wasn't only for prophets. Another figure stood here, one whose shadow still stretches across time. And he, too, looked toward Jerusalem and wept.
2,000 years ago, this same mountain that held the prayers of prophets became the stage for the footsteps of the Messiah. Jesus often came here, not to rule, but to speak, to grieve, and ultimately to ascend. The Mount of Olives was his classroom and his altar. Among the olive groves he taught truths that reached beyond empires, warnings of deception, hope of his return, and promises that time itself cannot erase. The words he spoke on this slope, the ones about signs, false saviors, and watchfulness, still echo like wind through the trees. On a quiet night, he crossed its path carrying sorrow. He looked toward the city lights flickering below, knowing the cross waited beyond them. Here he wept for Jerusalem's coming ruin, and yet his tears were not only for destruction, they were for renewal, for the day the city would finally welcome its king. Then came that final scene. Standing on this mountain, surrounded by his disciples, Jesus was lifted into the clouds, and the angels said what no prophecy watcher could forget: "This same Jesus will return just as you saw him go." The story of his departure became the promise of his return, and the Mount of Olives became the bridge between heaven's departure and heaven's arrival. Now, when the faithful look at this mountain dotted with graves, they do not only see a burial place, they see a promise waiting for re-entry. But if this mountain still bears the footprints of the ascended Christ, then what waits across from it? The silent wall of stone called the Eastern Gate may be holding its own secret. And that gate has not opened for centuries. Across from the Mount of Olives, the old city wall catches the light. There, half hidden behind centuries of dust, stands the Eastern Gate, its arches bricked solid, its passage blocked. To most, it's only a relic. To the people of faith, it is the gate of prophecy. Scripture tells of a gate on the east through which the Prince, the Messiah, will one day enter. Yet this very gateway has been sealed for hundreds of years. Layers of stone close its mouth, as if the city itself fears what may walk through when it finally opens. The irony? In trying to bar the way, history may have fulfilled the text it hoped to silence. In early centuries, rulers ordered the entrance walled shut, believing prophecy could be trapped behind mortar. Later, a Muslim cemetery was laid in front of it, a deliberate obstacle because traditions taught that a priestly Messiah would not cross defilement. Grave by grave, barrier by barrier, humanity tried to padlock a promise. But promises do not rust. Even behind the wall, the prophecy breathes. The gate remains there, facing the Mount of Olives like an unblinking watcher. Every sunrise ignites its stones, and every sunset casts the shadow of the mountain's graves upon its sealed face, as if heaven painted reminders that divine plans don't dissolve beneath cement. It is not only sealed in stone, it is sealed in waiting. From the mount to the gate stretches a silent line of earth and time, a corridor where prophecy sleeps with one eye open, and along that corridor, Jerusalem's oldest cemetery is growing. Those new graves are inching closer, row by row, toward this wall of silence. What happens when faith itself meets that sealed threshold? Between the Mount of Olives and the sealed Eastern Gate lies a hollow that runs like a scar through history, the Kidron Valley. It is quiet now, save for the rustle of olive leaves and the faint hum of traffic in modern Jerusalem. Yet beneath the soil of this valley sleeps one of the world's oldest and most revered cemeteries, the sacred slopes of the Mount of Olives burial ground. More than 100,000 tombs blanket these terraces, simple, pale stones all facing the city's eastern gate. Some are chipped with age, others newly laid, but all look the same direction, as if awaiting a signal. Jewish tradition teaches that when the Messiah comes, resurrection will begin right here. Those buried on this mountain believe they will rise first to greet him as he enters through that golden threshold.
For countless generations, families have carried their loved ones up this hill for burial, whispering prayers that the resting place would also be a starting line, the first to awaken when light breaks over the end of days. Each grave stands like a silent sentry, facing Jerusalem not out of sentiment, but anticipation. When you stand among them, the stillness feels alive. The wind slips through stone rows like breath through lips, telling stories of hope older than empire or war. This valley of shadows is truly a valley of trust. Every grave is a vote of faith cast into the future. Yet something remarkable is happening here. The cemetery is no longer still. Space is running out upon the upper terraces, and new graves now descend toward the city walls, closing the gap between tomb and gate. The line between waiting and fulfillment is shrinking. On the Mount of Olives today, chisels ring and dust drifts in the sun. Modern workers carve new tiers into the slope, adding row upon row of gleaming headstones. The mountain that once carried prophets now carries fresh markers, and each one edges the cemetery closer to the old city walls, closer to the sealed eastern gate. Authorities call it a simple necessity. The mountain has limited space. New generations still seek burial facing Jerusalem. Yet to eyes of faith, this isn't just expansion, it's alignment. Grave by grave, the field of white stone creeps toward the very threshold tied to the Messiah's return. Stand halfway down the hillside and watch. The new plots glitter in sunlight, pointing straight across the valley to that walled portal. The air feels thick with intent, as if every inscription, every slab of limestone is obeying a timetable older than memory. No blueprints planned this symbolism, but somehow the living landscape is composing a sermon. Families come to lay flowers, perhaps unaware they're part of a pattern. But through faith's lens, it seems that history is arranging itself for a moment beyond human scheduling. The question lingers in the heat. Is this only coincidence, a city's quiet expansion? Or has prophecy begun to speak again through ordinary decisions and unthinking workers of stone? Every new burial inches nearer to the sealed gate, closing the physical distance between promise and fulfillment. From above, the movement looks almost deliberate, as though the mountain itself knows the direction resurrection must come. And if the mountain is moving closer to the gate, what might that tell us about time moving closer to its appointed hour?
For centuries, the Mount of Olives has held its breath beneath prophecy. The expansion we see today isn't the first time this land has been caught between promise and fulfillment. Long ago, the prophet Ezekiel described the glory of God departing the temple, resting on this mountain to the east. Then came Zechariah, who spoke of a day when the Lord's feet would once again stand here, and the mountain would split in two, forming a great valley. These ancient voices still linger in the wind that crosses between the mount and the eastern gate. They told of an arrival, the Messiah coming from the east, entering a gate that would open only for him. And standing where those words were first spoken, you can almost feel the script unfolding beneath the surface of time. When you trace those prophecies forward to the New Testament, the pattern sharpens. Jesus ascended from this same mountain. Angels promised his return by the same route. What Ezekiel envisioned and Zechariah proclaimed, the disciples watched with their own eyes. The location was not metaphor. It was address. Every new grave, every sealed stone, every glance toward that gate is an echo of those verses, reverberating through centuries. The pattern that began with prophecy has become geography.
It's tempting to dismiss such alignment as poetry, a coincidence between scripture and scenery. Yet the closer the graves move to the wall, the harder that explanation feels. The map of Jerusalem seems to be quoting the Bible line by line. And if prophecy has fingerprints on the earth itself, perhaps the question isn't whether Scripture will be fulfilled, but how soon its shadow becomes substance. Jerusalem is never still. The shouts of vendors, the tolling of distant bells, the hum of prayers at dawn. It's the heartbeat of ancient faith in a modern frame. Yet under all that motion lies another pulse, quieter but persistent, the ache of waiting. Prophecy doesn't keep the same schedule as people. Centuries can pass between sentences. What seems like silence to us may be patience to God. And while news cameras chase politics and conflict, the truest drama may be unfolding stone by stone on a hillside that rarely makes the headlines. Each new grave laid on the Mount of Olives marks two stories at once, an ending and a continuation of expectation. The mourners bury a loved one, but they also plant a question. How close are we now? When workers lower another coffin facing east, they mirror generations who believed the next sunrise might split the sky. Some watchers feel that tension rising. The world seems smaller, history faster, yet prophecy moves with the slow confidence of eternity. The mountain keeps adding names. The gate stays shut. Two opposing truths welded together, the unstoppable flow of time and the immovable promise of return. From a distance, the cemetery's expansion looks calm, even bureaucratic. Up close, it feels like a clock that no one wound, but everyone hears. Each echo of hammer on stone, each new inscription cut into fresh limestone sounds like another tick toward a moment only heaven can call. When geography and prophecy begin to match, patience starts to look like countdown. The question pressing through every whisper of this city is simple, unsettling, and magnificent. Are we living in the space between verses? Amid all the signs and symbols, one truth keeps pulsing through. Prophecy isn't written just to inform, it's written to transform. The Mount of Olives tells the same story through its stones. Life ends, yet hope endures. For those who believe, each grave is not defeat, but expectation. The Apostle Paul wrote that the Lord himself will descend with a shout, and the dead will rise first. The faithful buried on this slope have been rehearsing that hope for millennia. They rest facing the direction from which their Redeemer will come. What looks like a field of silence is in fact a choir waiting for its cue. The sealed gate proclaims the same truth in reverse. Humanity closed it. Heaven will open it. Each blocked arch stands as an accidental altar to anticipation. Just as the stones cannot keep the dead from rising, they cannot keep the King from returning. Yet the message of this mountain isn't meant to breed fear. It calls to readiness, the quiet strength of trust. To live as though every sunrise might be the one that fulfills the promise, and to love, build, and pray with eyes lifted east. When the world feels chaotic, the Mount of Olives offers perspective. Beneath the noise of headlines, another order holds, divine timing, patient and precise. The graves move closer to the gate, not to signal panic, but to remind us that God's plans advance, even when we do not notice. Prophecy isn't a puzzle to decode. It's an invitation to be awake.
And if every stone, gate, and shadow in Jerusalem whispers the same refrain, that the King will return, then the real question turns inward. Are our hearts facing east, too?
Night settles over Jerusalem like a veil of bronze and silver. From the Mount of Olives, the view of the city glows faintly, domes gleaming, walls casting long shadows. Down the slopes, tens of thousands of tombs glimmer pale under the moon, their faces turned toward the sealed eastern gate. It's breathtaking and unsettling, like standing at the edge of a story that refuses to end. The gate across the valley stays silent. The air between mountain and wall feels thick with unspoken promise, as if creation itself knows that one day stillness will break, stones will shake, light will slice the horizon. Until that moment, the mountain waits. Every carved name, every silent grave is another syllable in a word humanity hasn't finished pronouncing: hope. The living continue their days, the buried keep their watch. Perhaps heaven measures time not by calendars, but by readiness. From above, the pattern is unmistakable, a river of white stone flowing toward a locked door. It looks like progress and mystery woven together, a sermon written in geography. No trumpet has sounded yet, but the stage is set. The question is never only about prophecy's timetable, it's about posture. The city sleeps, yet faith looks eastward. The sealed gate hides its secret, the mountain holds its breath. And somewhere, between those stones and that silence, eternity is already moving. So when the wind passes over the Mount of Olives tonight, listen closely. It may sound ordinary, but perhaps it's the faintest echo of approaching footsteps, steps that will one day cross that valley, press upon that mountain, and push open a gate the world believes is shut forever. The stones know, the silence counts, and the countdown has already begun.